The famous phrase of Hermes Trismegistus. I'm going to read it out now, because I don't hope for my memory anymore. The law of cosmic analogies sounds like this: what is below is similar, well, not equal to what is above, but what is above is similar to what is below, for the viscous development of a wonderful single thing. Miracles are the only things that are written with a capital letter. It is a sacred symbol of some kind from the code of the universe. And we will try to find this one thing with you too. I must say that the principle of the building structure of our world has long been, in general, featured in various cultures. Let's remember at least about the Chinese famous triad of man, heaven, earth. Here there's on the slide the same ternary structure that was at one time, in my opinion, wings. The supreme God Viracocha, the divine world above, the earthly world, the underworld. In other words, most cultures, generally speaking, tended to the fact that it is necessary to classify the world into three levels at least, and the fourth, the superworld, the divine world. In the Middle Ages, in general, they also perceived the world in about the same way. As you know, there is an earthly world, there is a divine world where angels live. There is an underground world where all sorts of devils, demons, and so on live. In other words, the idea of the Trinity itself is as old as the world. But what are we going to do with you? Now we are going to turn this idea into some mathematical exact structure. To do this, we will need to recall again our hierarchical axis of the universe, which, as you remember, in previous lectures we considered from -33rd degree of the fundamental Planck length to 1027th. But this is a simplification. In fact, 10/28th degree of centimeters is the size of our metagalaxy. I want to say right away that the fundamental Planck length is not my invention. It is an absolutely official concept that I did not invent again. And it's the same with metagalaxy. There is a slight confusion. Some people ask, what is the difference between the universe and metagalaxy? But for modern physics, metagalaxy is the universe. Why? Because physics accepts only the world that it sees, which it can study with the help of instruments. In fact, of course, the real universe, it is much larger, it is infinite, and our metagalaxy has boundaries. From the maxim, from the smallest particle to the metagalaxy, the entire hierarchy of the universe contains only 61 orders of magnitude. After all, 61 orders of magnitude includes all the particles that we know: electrons, protons, neutrons, atoms, molecules, people, rocks, asteroids, stars, galaxy, supercouple, everything that we know from the material world. Everything has dimensions, and all these dimensions are in this range. Only it turns out that this beautiful hierarchical world of dimensions can be very strictly divided into exactly 3 floors. The upper floor is the megasphere, where star systems, galaxies, and so on live. The middle floor, which we live with you, which we see constantly around us. The lower floor, which we do not know, we do not see, which is below the proton level. This is the so-called Dirac basement, or a floor, in which it is assumed that there are some strings, some other structures, well, in general, dark things that few people still know about. Thus, if we divide it into 3 floors, then we get a ternary structure of the universe. But on what basis do we divide it? Conditionally. No, not conditionally. I'll explain why. The fact is that when I built my large-scale wave of a harmonious universe, I discovered that our interaction, which modern physics knows, but I know only 4 types of interaction. Electromagnetic and gravitational interactions are well known to everyone. There are strong interactions that act inside the nuclei. They are very short-acting. They have certain boundaries of interaction from all directions. That is, they act at distances of the order of 10⁻13th degree of centimeters. And these forces do not act at a distance of neither more nor less. There are poorly understood weak interactions that operate inside this microcosm, which are responsible for the decay of elementary particles. Now, if these 4 interactions are location-scale axes, then we will get 3 clear sections. At the junction of the first and second weak electromagnetic, there are just strong interactions. How accurate this division is, we will now see with you. When I started to deal with this, I realized that the division into 3 sections carries a very, very deep symbolism. Why? Because if we propose such a scheme, which is on the slide, then it is clear that from the right slope of the potential stability pit, all objects tend to slide down. That is, they will decrease in size. That is, shrink, gravity acts there. Gravity collects everything and reduces the size. That is, if you have some kind of field cloud, over time it turns into a star, decreasing in size. That is, it rolls down this right slope. If we look at the weak forces, then everything is falling apart there. Everything is increasing in size there. There was a particle, it fell apart, the size increased. Disintegration. So here is the connection, here is the decay. And in the middle, there are electromagnetic forces in the middle. And what does electromagnetic forces do? Depending on the charges, they can connect, they can push apart. If there are charges of the same name, then this is a repulsion. If there are different charges, then this is a connection. Thus, this whole picture can be depicted in the terminology of Chinese dialectics. Yin-yang. Yang is a male force that gathers. Yin is a female force that ruins everything from the inside. In the middle, there are electromagnetic yin-yang forces, which are transitional intermediate. Here, this is the first conclusion we can draw. Moreover, this border, I'll tell you about it later, actually runs very strictly on the scale axis. This is not some abstract boundary that I poked my finger at and said here. No. I'll explain why now. But before I explain this, I'll show you one more conclusion that follows from this picture. My deep reflections led me to realize that everything that is inside the yin part, everything that is smaller than a proton, and everything that belongs to the Dirac basement are all elementary particles, including they are formed by strictly resonant processes. And that's why everything there is adjusted to the limit of accuracy. Why? Because if there is a resonance, then the resonance itself always adjusts itself to the final maximum effect. This final maximum effect leads to the fact that everything that is obtained from the initial elements all has the same dimensions, charge, mass, and so on. Therefore, all elementary particles, proton, neutron, and the rest, being anywhere in our world, they all have a very clear, understandable mass, which is no different anywhere. And it is impossible to remove even a fraction of this mass from this particle. And if you remove, the particles disintegrate, for example. If you add it, it changes. In other words, nothing can be changed here. Everything is very strictly gassed here. It's like an image, of course, engineering, like balls in ball bearings, like billiard balls, which should be the same size, and so on. And so on, and so on. I called this world the elemental world. The middle world in which we live is the object world. Why? Because there are objects here. You and I are objects. We are stones. These are objects. What is an object? An object is a body that has a shape. Objects are a body that has boundaries. But systems live in the megamire. The system differs from objects in that there are no clear shapes. There are no clear boundaries. Everything is blurred there. In some way, this is a system. Objects that are composed of, let's say, stars, star clusters. Stars and planets are planetary systems, and galaxies are made up of many stars. At first glance, it's just a bunch of everything. In fact, when you start to figure it out, realizing that it's not a bunch of everything, it's also some kind of objects. Only these are system-type objects. It's difficult to explain it right away. It's all described in detail in my books. I just want to fix 3 types of beings in the physical world. Elements, objects, systems. Elements are elementary particles, and what is below them? Objects are our world. The system is anything more than planets and stars. This is everything that consists of planets, stars, and so on, and so on, and so on. And now let's see how exactly the boundaries between the 3 worlds are drawn. In order to check this, we need to take the entire range from -33rd to 27th, or up to 28th. It depends on how accurately we want to get it all, and divide it into 3 parts with a compass, ruler, whatever you want. And you and I will get the dimensions that are shown here on the slide. The dimensions will get strange, not round. Let's say that 12,47 is the boundary between the microcosm, and the macrocosm, 786 plus, is the boundary between the macrocosms and the megamere. At first glance, these are some abstract conditional boundaries that I myself impose on you here. But let's see, let's translate -1247 into real dimensions. We get that -1247 is exactly the size of the proton, neutron, and primary nuclei. That is, it is here at this boundary. If we set aside a third of this entire area for maximum, we get the size of the most common particles in the universe, but clones with a very high degree of accuracy, mind you. That is, what is it to get to the 100th with the fact that we have a range of 20 orders of magnitude? This is to the highest degree of accuracy. In modern physics, a scatter of tens of percent, sometimes even hundreds of percent, is allowed. But here the accuracy of the hit is fractions of percent. And how did we do it? How did we get this result? We just took a segment and just divided it into 3 parts using a ruler. Any student can do this. How simple it is. Well, okay, it could be a coincidence. Let's look at another boundary between the microcosm and the megaworld. There we get a size depending on the model from 748 to 786. If these numbers, which mean nothing to you, are translated into centimeters and then into kilometers, then we will get that it is dressed from 3 to 400 kilometers of the border. Yes, that is, if I say the number 748, it means that it is 10 to the power of 7,48. 10,7 is 100 kilometers, 1048 is a little more, it's about 200 or 300 kilometers. This is elementary arithmetic. Each of you can test me by taking a slide ruled the old-fashioned way, or some other calculators, and see if I'm right or wrong. So, the boundaries between 200 or 300 kilometers. Some kind of strange border. Why this particular border? How to check whether there are boundaries between the microcosm and the world of megami systems? Very simple. To do this, we take photos of all the objects known to us in the solar system that have the size of a macrorange and a megadrange, and look at how they look. Let's start with the fact that there are specks of dust, microspecks in space. Their photos are clearly visible here. They have a chaotic shape. Larger particles also have a chaotic shape. The stones that fall on us in the form of meteorites also have a chaotic shape. Asteroids, small planets, have an asymmetrical shape. We are going through this range of 20 orders of magnitude, and we see a chaotic form everywhere. What does this form say? It says that electromagnetic forces are responsible for the shape of these objects, which add one atom to another. We don't know how this happens. Let's assume that from the primary molecular clouds or dust clouds, all this was molded into one place, or it was then divided into pieces. The bottom line is that electromagnetic forces are responsible for the shape of these objects. But as soon as we step over the border of 200 or 300 kilometers, we find ourselves in a world of completely different planets. You can see it on the slide. These are spherical planets, round, spherical. Moreover, the jump occurs at a size from 1042 to 1038. That is, about somewhere around 300 kilometers. This is where the transition from electromagnetic forms to gravitational forms takes place. What does this mean? This means that there is only a body a little more than 250 to 180 kilometers as the gravitational force of this body, but 4 stones, of course, we are talking about. They begin to compress this body and change shape. Gravity overpowers electromagnetic forces, overpowers. You know, it's like arm wrestling. Electromagnetic forces are winning here. Gravity is retreating here. It is weak. But we have crossed the border 300 kilometers, and gravity defeats electromagnetic forces, collecting all a single spherical shape, then some spheres. Starting from the planet Mimos. This is the smallest spherical planet that I have been able to detect. I think there will be a transition at other points of the universes, because the laws of physics are the same throughout the universe. Next, Miranda, somewhere out there, in my opinion, it's already more than 800 kilometers. Planets, suns, and so on, all the stars, and a giant range of somewhere on the order of at least 10 spherical shapes, where gravity works. Electromagnetic forces on these scales also exist, of course. There are electromagnetic fields that permeate the galaxy, galactic only magnetic fields, planetary. But they do not play any role for the formation of these structures, these systems. All the systems that we know, which are bigger than this planet Mimos, all these systems are formed only by gravity, one single one.
Все эти системы формируются только гравитацией, одной единственной.
She commands the parade. Thus, we have checked these two boundaries with you, felt them, and made sure that they are very accurate. What does this mean? The fact that this whole system is threefold, it is organized, most likely due to the fact that there are oscillatory pulsation processes, which I talked about in previous lectures, which create certain resonant structures, certain nodes. And there are areas of responsibility there. The area of responsibility of the middle world is electromagnetic forces. The area of responsibility of the microcosm is gravity. The area of responsibility of the submicrocosm is weak interaction. They behave differently. They have completely different characteristics. That is why I think it is not possible to create a unified field theory. Because the unified field theory does not imply such a division of labor. Well, I'm not going to delve into the field of physics now, because I'm not a physicist myself. And I'll leave all my assumptions on this topic to a physicist. So, you and I realized that the structure, the large-scale, hierarchical structure of the universe, has clearly divided three floors. Each of these floors has its own forces at work. This is the first thing we realized. Based on this structure, I made up some energy model which told me where to look for a new kind, source, a new source of energy.
Которая мне подсказала, где искать новый источник энергии.
Just that it would seem, right? How did I do it? I just placed all these three floors from the slide. It is clearly visible, in such a way as to understand where the energy is drawn from on each of these floors. The energy source for the macro stage is chemical interactions, nuclear interactions. These are orders of magnitude from 10 minus the 13th to 10 minutes of the 8th. It is at these sizes that either nuclear, or chemical energy is released. If we rise higher than the chemical level, there are probably also some energy sources there, but they are not decisive for us. Because what does humanity live by? It burns hydrocarbons, receives a chemical energy source. Either it's nuclear power plants, nuclear fission. There is energy there. If we go up to the megaworld and see where the energy source is, then these are the cores of stars. The cores of stars are on the order of hundreds of kilometers, thousands of kilometers. The stars themselves are again another 5 orders of magnitude more. And we discover that there are also their own sources of energy, which are for us as if living below. Very important sources of energy. But this energy source, again, where does this energy come from? It is taken from those sizes. On those sizes it stands out, which corresponds to the first 5 orders of the upper floor. There are, of course, phenomena that fall out for this scheme, because any scheme, as you understand, is conditional. But if you look at it in the most general terms, it is so. That's why I told you. This is so that if we go down 20 orders of magnitude below our macro level into the microcosm, and consider the microcosm from the fundamental particle of Planck maximum and up to the top floor to the proton, that is. There are also 20 orders of magnitude here. Then we should assume by analogy, by similarity, that all the energy that is in this ether, in this basement, it is produced and released not at the top. That is, not inside the proton, because the proton is at the upper boundary between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And somewhere down there, at the level of the fundamental Planck length, where there are no elementary particles. And where is it? It's everywhere. This is all the space that fills us. It is filled with this energy, the energy of the ether, which cannot be obtained from elementary particles. Moreover, this energy of elementary particles is conserved. It is closed there with the help of resonances. And to get it out of there, in order to get excess energy from a proton, let's say, you always need to spend more energy than you get. In other words, there will always be an energy-consuming process. Therefore, when they built a large Hadronian collider and began, let's say, just to bash at the unfortunate particles, in order to see something there, then you imagine, in order to get some energy sources from them, what kind of monster of gigantic size had to be built in order to get at least something from a small, tiny particle. And in order to receive ethereal energy, no large collider drones are needed at all, because ethereal energy can be received. Even by a person looking ahead, I can say, very pure, enlightened, who has the whole hierarchy enlightened, where there are no traffic jams for holy people. Holy people can draw this energy from space and transform it into any other energy they only know. But in order to become such a person, it is necessary to go through an evolutionary path and really rise above the human and essence and become. Here I'm already leaving science, getting into the realm of mysticism, all sorts of reasoning, so let's stop at this for now. So, looking at this energy picture, we are convinced that it has very interesting practical conclusions. In other words, we can assume that the energy that is always looking for ethereal energies, which Tesla was looking for, which many scientists are actually not inside elementary particles, but in it just. And in it means in an empty space. The question is, where in empty space is this energy so that it can be most easily obtained? This is the first question. The second question is how to organize the material world around these points in order to receive this energy. And the third question is how it will be possible to get this energy to turn it into the energy we need, which we need thermal energy to warm up. We want it to be warm at home, and then, with the help of thermal energy, move some objects. And the fourth question is how to get this energy so as not to kill ourselves. Why? Because we remember the history of the development of nuclear energy. When people joyfully watched the explosions of atomic bombs in the Nevada desert, bought tickets, paid money, sat on chairs, put on sunglasses, and watched an atomic bomb explode. No one understood that behind this beautiful picture of a nuclear mushroom and the release of huge energy, there was a very dark background in the form of radiation, which then health in general led a person to nowhere. I have no doubt that it can be with this energy, because if we receive energy uncontrollably, without understanding, then it is possible that some free energy that will be released at the same time, it can destroy everything you want. Moreover, it can destroy even not so much our physical body, as it can destroy our information body, mental body, and whatever body you want. And before going in this direction, in the direction of this energy, from my point of view, from the point of view of a very careful person, because I still say once again, Taurus and all Taurus, they are very slowly, gradually moving. We really need to think about how to go there, how to protect ourselves from this. In other words, it is necessary to create a very, very serious program here. Well, I understand that no one will hear what I'm saying, that everyone will rush to get this energy in the future anyway. And even now they are trying headlong, not paying attention to anything, and that there will be victims, of course, unfortunately. At one time, as you know, when they studied ball lightning, an associate of Lomonosov died. A German scientist, I forgot his last name, unfortunately. That is, unfortunately, the entire research part of science has been sent away by victims. Curie was also injured, Kurgachev was also injured. In other words, a lot of people who were engaged in nuclear energy suffered. As they say, I warned as much as I could. And then, as people themselves want, they will act. But now let's move on from this practical part to the romantic part of the Trinity of the universe. Then I gradually realized that it was boring to describe the hierarchical world of the universe with my one wave. I found many other models in ancient sources that I liked already when I realized this. In particular, this slide here, on which you see just the lower world, there is an upper world, there is a middle world. This is an ancient model, I do not know from where, from what cultures, from what times it was taken. But it is depicted in the form of an egg. Why? The ancients believed that if life is born from an egg, the egg splits, then, probably, the whole universe, as some living entity, initially represents a certain egg, from which everything then appears. Here, purely for beauty, for simplicity, I used this idea of an egg, and built my egg, my Easter egg, let's say so, right. I'm going to show it to you now. This picture was drawn by my associate artist Kinsbergsky according to my ideas. It was drawn for an article in the magazine Technique of Youth. This was published a few years ago on this topic. And you see that there is an egg here, in which there are three levels: the microcosm, the macrocosm, the megamere. And my wave spirals around this egg, going up. And there are three floors here. There are hot zones at the bottom on each floor, energy, and there are upper cold zones, structural. Multiple structural, crystalline structural macrocosm, a metagalactic foam structure in the megamere. And I think that in the microcosm, there is some kind of cellular structure inside protons, neutrons.
И я думаю, что в микромире какая-то такая ячеистая структура есть внутри протонов, нейтронов.
So, we have examined the three floors of metagalaxy, examined in detail, examined their essential side. Of course, we looked at this very large scale. We looked at it in the most general terms. There are a lot of nuances and details. Before proceeding to these details, you just need to understand the whole. In other words, there are, as you know, two methods of cognition, inductive, deductive. The inductive method, which dominates in modern science, is the method when we collect some facts into a single picture. And the deductive method, when we proceed from a general concept, from a general picture, and then begin to detail it. What I'm telling you now is a deductive method. In other words, we first choose some general model, then we delve into it, then we delve into it again, we delve into it again, and work out the details. Let's go deeper. Deep down, we will come to biological life. Biological life on the scale axis, as you can see in this picture, takes 15 orders of magnitude from viruses to the biosphere. If we consider these 15 orders of magnitude separately from the large-scale wave, we will see that there are also three floors that were mastered by evolution in stages. The first floor is a stage of unicellular organisms. The second floor is a stage of multicellular organisms. The third floor is a little studied stage. The floor is poorly studied, and the stage is also, by the way, evolution. This is a stage, a floor. These are populations, biocenoses, social structures, and so on. So, how do they differ? They differ primarily in that the entire floor of unicellular organisms is a variety of unicellular organisms, and the entire floor of multicellular organisms is the floor, on which multicellular bodies are built from these unicellular organisms. Our body, the body of a tree, an ant, from a small crustacean to a sequoia. The entire floor of multicellular organisms occupies exactly 5 orders of magnitude. The 5 orders of magnitude that I remind you is the 10/5, it's 100,000. That is, if we take the largest animal of the organism and the smallest, let's say, a rotifer of some kind, then there is a distance of about 5 orders of magnitude between them. Why order? Because in fact, all these floors, they do not fit together, but overlap. In other words, you can find cells that are larger than multicellular organisms, and you can find multicellular organisms that are correspondingly smaller than cells, but still there is this border between them. In other words, we have 15 orders of life from the virus to the biosphere. We can safely divide these 15 orders of magnitude into 3 floors of the same ones: microfloor, macro, and megafloor. Each floor has 5 orders of magnitude. Unlike the universe, where, as you remember, there are 20 orders of magnitude, but again 3 floors. Moreover, everyone knows that the unicellular world is different from the multicellular world. I'm not making any discoveries here. I'm just relying on generally understandable, well-known patterns. These are fundamentally different worlds. The world of unicellular, the world of multicellular. Another thing is that there is a world of populations, societies, biocenoses, and so on, which, in fact, we understand very poorly. Not that we will study, we understand. These are the body's own systems that live their own lives, but this is the body system, which begin with just tens, hundreds of meters in fact. This is a microbiocenosis, up to a giant biocenosis of the biosphere. These are different worlds, different laws apply, and these worlds have. There are also only 3 of these worlds on a large-scale hierarchy. That is, the upper world. Of societies, the middle world. Organisms and the lower world are unicellular. Moreover, life, evolution, and these worlds were mastered in stages. At first, about 2 billion unicellular organisms developed. Then about 500 million organisms were called. Well, it's hard to say at the expense of the population, societies, and other things, because this area has not been studied. And when active development began, generally speaking, we will not consider it now. How are these worlds arranged? Here on the slide, it is more clearly shown that here are 5 orders of the simplest unicellular organisms. Then multicellular organisms appeared. The cow is shown here as a kind of average representative of this world, and then societies. 3 floors of 5 orders in each. But this is even more clearly depicted. This slide shows pictures from a virus to an infusoria in size, from a rotifer to a sequoia, and from the simplest human family, but the sphere as a whole. What do we see? We see that the whole of life, the whole hierarchy of life, the whole range, in the same way, the entire range of the universe, is divided quite strictly into 3 different floors. There is also a ternary code. Let's see if there is another similarity here. Yes, we see the same similarity. That is, if in the universe we see some elementary particles and their substructures on the lower floor. On the middle floor, we see objects, cosmic bodies. On the upper floor, meta-objects. These are systems. We see the same thing in the biosphere. These are unicellular elements of the biosphere. These are multicellular objects of the biosphere. And these are biosystems. So we have a similarity. There is an upper floor of metagalaxy. These are metasystems. There are herds of, let's say, animals in the biosphere. And these, relatively speaking, if we transfer terminology, are herds of stars that form star clusters. We see an object on the middle floor, let's say an asteroid here, let's say we have a bison. And we see on the lower floor, these are special elements. These are elements of elementary particles, and their structures of the lower level. And here we see the simplest organisms like viruses, bacteria, and so on live. And in what sense can we talk about similarity here? The fact is that if we look at this structure, this picture reflects the structure of one of the simplest viruses, which is also called a virion. Then we see that this structure consists of, in my opinion, these are protein molecules inside RNA. So, if we see such a viral structure, as in this slide, then we must understand that the removal of one molecule from this structure will lead to the destruction of the virus. He will stop living. Adding an extra molecule will also lead to the destruction of the virus. Also in RNA. That is, this type of virus is adjusted to the exact molecule. Each molecule consists of atoms. Atoms consist mainly of nucleons. We know that the masses of the nucleons are very precisely determined with an accuracy of a few decimal places. And what follows from this? It follows from this that the mass of any virus can be determined with the same accuracy, up to a few decimal places. When we add up all the protons that are in the molecule, and we have no right to change this mass, we cannot without the death of this virus. In other words, the world of viruses is a very tough world. The world of unambiguous structures, the world of elements that make up the biosphere. This is a very important conclusion in fact, yes, although it lies on the surface. Combining these two structures, the ternary structure of the metagalaxy and the ternary structures of the biosphere, we get this picture. I called it a compressed or holographic scale likeness. I'm leaving the term fractals here. Why fractals do not fully reflect the essence of this picture. And on the right, we see there is a hierarchy system matrix, the triple code of the universe, systems, object, elements. And this is a threefold structure. It is projected onto the entire range of life, and projected onto the entire range of our metagalaxy. The same structure is the elements of the system object. We stop there and move on to the internal structure. In other words, remember, we are talking about the deductive method, immersion in more and more subtle details. Starting from the very top level, consider the unicellular world. For us it was just the lower floor. If we look closely at what kind of system microscope, we will see that the world of unicellular actually consists of 3 subworlds or 3. The kingdom of viruses, the kingdom of bacteria, and the kingdom of
бактерий и
cells.
царство клеток.
On a large-scale
масштабной
ossetia,
сети три
the three
царства
kingdoms
занимают
occupy strictly
строго
their place.
свое место.
Viruses range in
Вирусы
size
имеют
from
размеры
tens
от
of
десятков
nanometers to hundreds of
до
nanometers.
сотен нанометров.
Bacteria are of
Бактерии
size
имеют
and
размеры
submicron.
субмикронные.
Cells have a size from
Клетки
10
имеют
microns
размер от 10
to 100
микрон до 100
microns on
микрон в
average,
среднем.
even
Возможно,
more,
побольше,
perhaps
да.
up to 150, 300 microns.
То есть
That
каждый
is,
из этих
each of
трех
these
царств
three kingdoms
находится на
is clearly
масштабной оси
located
в
on the
своем
scale
месте
axis
четко.
in its
Теперь,
place.
мы
But we looked
посмотрели
at the
на
microcosm of life and saw
жизни и
three
увидели там
kingdoms
три
there. If we go up on the
Если мы
macrocosms
поднимемся
in the
на
body to
макромир,
the world where
в
animals
организме,
and plants
там, где
live,
живут
then we
животные,
would like to
растения,
see some
то
three
хотелось бы
kingdoms there
увидеть там
too.
тоже каких-то три
And we
царства.
actually
Мы там
see
их
them
видим,
there.
на самом деле.
There are only
Существует
three
три
realms.
царства.
This is the
Это
kingdom of
царство
plants, the
растений,
primary
первичное
source,
исходное,
the kingdom of
царство
animals, and the
животных,
kingdom of
царство
fungi.
грибов.
Open the
Откройте
reference books.
справочники.
There
Никаких
are no
других
other
царств
realms there. But they
Но
don't
они
really
на самом
form the
деле
same
в
hierarchy in
размерном
dimensional
плане не
terms.
образуют такую
Why?
иерархию.
Because
Почему?
there are
Потому что
plants
есть
that occupy the
растения,
entire range,
есть диапазон
there are animals that
занимающий,
occupy
есть животные,
sizes.
которые занимают
That is,
размеры,
there is a
так
blurred
сказать. То есть
dimensional
там это
picture.
размытая
There is no
картина,
such
размерная. Там
correspondence.
нет такого
And what
соответствия.
is
А что
there?
там есть? Там есть
There's a
системное
systemic difference
различие
between the
между
two,
ними. Какое?
the
Такое,
same
как
as
есть
it is in the
царство
kingdom of
Закачки.
unicellular,
Существует
namely,
как бы три
there are
типа
three types of
живых
living
организмов,
organisms
которые
that
различаются
differ in their
по
relationship
их
to bone
отношению
energy,
к
bone matter.
костной энергии, костному веществу.
These are
Это
producers,
продуценты,
consultants, and
консументы и
reducers.
редуценты.
Producers are
Продуценты
organisms
— это
that produce
организмы, которые
organic matter.
производят органическое вещество.
But this is a
Ну, это
plant in our
растения в
world
нашем
with
мире
you,
с вами,
the
в макромире,
microcosm, and
и в
mostly
основном
bacteria
бактерии
in the
в микро.
microcosm. Reducers are
Редуценты — это
organisms
организмы,
that
которые
decompose organic
разлагают
matter,
органическое
which
вещество,
absorb dead matter,
которые
which kill
поглощают
organic
отмершее
matter in
вещество,
part.
которые убивают органическое вещество. Ну, отчасти.
These are
Это
mushrooms
в
in our
нашем с
world,
вами мире
in the lower
грибы,
world,
например, да?
in the microcosm.
А в
These are
этом нижнем
viruses.
мире, микромире, это вирусы.
And here are the consults.
А вот
These are
консументы — это
consumers of
потребители
organic
органического
matter.
вещества.
In our world,
В нашем
these
мире
are
это
animals
животные,
that
которые
feed on
питаются
plants.
растениями.
They can't feed
Они
on
не
the sun.
могут
They can't feed
питаться
chemically.
солнцем,
The
не
truth
могут
is,
питаться
I'm going to
физически.
eat the sun
Правда,
now.
есть сейчас солнце
I would
есть,
like
я
to put at least
посмотрел,
some kind of experiment on a
надо
person,
эксперимент
put him
поставить,
in the sun,
посадить
and
его на
see.
солнце,
That is,
посмотреть. То есть
I
не
do not
выглядит,
believe that there can
может
be a
быть,
plant man.
человек-растение.
Because
Потому
if
что
a
если
person is an
человек
animal,
животное,
then
то
he
он
is an
животное,
animal.
он потребляет
He
должен
must
какое-то
consume some
органическое
kind of
вещество.
organic matter.
Потому что идея
Because the
человека,
idea
который
of a
живет за
person
счет
who lives off solar
солнечной энергии,
energy
это
is the
идея
idea of a
человека-растения,
plant man,
по
in
сути.
fact. It's still the
Это
same thing in the
консумент.
world of unicellular.
И то же самое в мире
They have their
одноклеточных.
own
Там есть свои
consulates.
консументы,
These are
это
single-celled
ядерные
nuclear
клетки.
cells. Let's say
Одноклеточные. Ну,
infusoria.
допустим, инфузории,
Infusoria
там,
are
вообще
predators.
хищники.
Amoebas
Амебы
are also
тоже хищники.
predators.
Ну, там,
Let's say flagellates, which most likely also consume bacteria,
позвончиковые,
feed on
которые, скорее
bacteria.
всего, тоже потребляют бактерии, питаются бактериями.
In other
То
words,
есть
we
мы
see three
видим
types of
три
nutrition.
типа питания.
The first type of
Первый тип
nutrition
питания,
is when
когда
organisms
организм
receive
получает
energy and
энергию
matter
и
from the bone nature.
вещество из
That
космоса.
is, let's say there is solar
Природы.
energy,
То есть, допустим, там
chemical
солнечная энергия,
energy,
химическая
some other
энергия,
kind
еще
of
какую-то
thermal
тепловую
energy.
энергию.
Take minerals
Берут
and turn
минеральное
it into
вещество
a
и
living
превращают
thing.
это в живое.
Remember,
Запомни,
these are
это
producers.
продуценты.
Those who
Те,
feed
кто
on these
питается
producing
этими
plants are the consults,
растениями,
we are with
продуценты.
you,
Это консументы, мы с вами.
and those who
А те,
dispose of it
кто
all at the lower
утилизирует
level
это
are
всё
the
на нижнем,
reducers.
это редуценты.
Let's see if there is such a
Посмотрим, есть ли в
division
нашем
on each
вот
of the
этом
three
мире
floors in our
биосферы
biosphere world
на
here.
каждом из трех этажей такое разделение.
Here on the slide,
на
I
слайде
tried to
я
find such a
попытался такое
correspondence,
соответствие
that is,
найти. То есть
divide all
разделить
three
все три
floors
этажа
into three
на три
sublevels.
подуровня.
At the
Значит,
lower
на
level,
нижнем уровне
bacteria are
бактерии
mainly
в основном
consumers of the
являются
arrow
потребителями,
coming from the
стрелка
sun.
идет от солнца, да?
This is a
Вот
conditional
условное
mineral
минеральное
substance.
вещество.
On our
Значит,
floor,
на нашем
on the
самом
macro
этаже,
level,
на
these are
макроэтаже это
plants.
растения.
And here we
И
get
тут
to
мы
the
попадаем
third
с вами на
floor,
третий
which I
этаж,
did not
который
consider
я
from the point
рассматривал
of
с
view of
точки зрения
biosynodic
биосинозных
processes.
процессов, почему?
Because
Потому
little
что
studied
малоизученное
phenomena,
явление.
I
Я
tried to
пытался
build the
построить
same
такую же
model
модель
for
для
social
социальных
organisms.
организмов.
Let's take
Еще
another
раз
look at our macro
посмотрим
level.
на наш макроуровень.
Plants create
Растения
biomass.
создают
Animals consume this
биомассу, животные
biomass.
потребляют эту биомассу.
Fungi,
Грибы
decomposing this
эту
biomass,
биомассу
are disposed of
разлагающие,
and
утилизируют,
converted back
превращают
into
обратно
mineral
в минеральное
substance.
вещество.
Let's look at the social
Значит,
floor.
посмотрим на
This
социальный
is where the
этап.
so-called
Здесь
speculation
начинается,
begins.
так называемая
What is
спекуляция.
speculation?
Что такое спекуляция?
Speculation
Спекуляция — это
is an
попытка
attempt to
построить
build some some kind of model based on some assumptions, similarities that have not been fully tested and calculated. In other words, this is such a preliminary model. Can we find such 3 floors here? Yes. Production forces are those forces that are responsible for the fact that physical matter and energy are consumed and transformed into something so productive. This is everything that is connected with production, agriculture, factories, where bone matter is transformed into some objects of the social world. There is an upper
Есть
floor,
верхний
a
этаж,
social setting.
социальная настройка.
Nothing is
Там
produced
ничего не
there.
производится.
These
Это всё
are all
управляется.
managers,
Системы
power
власти,
systems,
силовые
power
структуры,
structures, medicine,
медицина,
education, culture.
учеба, культура.
That
То
is,
есть там,
where
где
people
люди
do not
ничего не
produce anything,
производят,
but at the same
но при этом
time,
они же всё
they consume
потребляют.
everything. They consume
Они
what other
потребляют то,
systems
что
produce.
производят другие системы.
Agriculture
Сельское
produces
хозяйство
food,
производит
officials
еду,
eat it,
чиновники
they do
её
not do
едят,
anything
сами
themselves.
ничем не
But
занимаются.
if
Ну, если там
Lushkov grows
Лужков
bees,
выращивает
this is
всё,
his
это его
personal
личное,
hobby,
так сказать, хобби,
which
которое
has
никакого
nothing to
отношения
do
к
with his
функции не
function.
имеет, да?
And there is a
Вот. И
lower
есть
floor
нижний этаж.
utilizers.
Утилизаторы.
Utilizers are
Утилизаторы
parasites,
это
criminals,
паразиты,
shadows,
преступники,
dependents,
неотсоединенцы,
as in that
как
movie
вообще,
Three Steps
три
Forward.
шага вперед, да? Вот.
Here we come
Здесь
to
мы
some
приходим к такому
paradoxical
парадоксальному
conclusion
выводу, что
that just
так
as
же,
the
как без
world of the
грибов
multicellular
может
biosphere
существовать
cannot
мир
exist without mushrooms,
биосферы
so it does
многоклеточных,
not
так же
work without
получается без
criminals,
преступников,
parasites, dependents,
тунеядцев,
the social world cannot
издевенцев, не
exist.
может существовать мир социальный.
This conclusion, of course, causes me a fierce opposition of my inner moral state. But as a scientist, I cannot fail to draw this conclusion, and I cannot fail to convey it to the audience. Why? Because this conclusion needs to be understood. And suddenly these very parasites and so on, they dispose only of what has already died out. And here we come to another phenomenal conclusion. We are well aware of the situation in Russia and what is happening in Russia. And who is at the top, we perfectly represent. And why exactly are such forces at the top? I'm not going to classify them now out of political correctness, right? And so everything is clear. Yes, because our body is Swarovski, which was created in fact for 1,000 years, the same giant system that was built. It is in a state of decomposition. And since it decomposes, the corresponding social organisms control the process of decomposition. I will not specify again, and so everything is clear. That's when we start creating a new organism, a system, a living new one, on new foundations, then everything will be fine again. There will be real managers at the top, as a matter of fact, real doctors, real power structures, that will protect the living new system and will manage in the right direction. I repeat once again, I really do not like to engage in politics, and therefore the conclusions that I have made here are not for politics. They are for understanding systemic patterns. If we generalize these systemic patterns, we will get such a very interesting picture. In other words, we see the entire scale range, in which there are 3 floors: unicellular, multicellular, and social structures. This is the so-called film of life, 15 orders of magnitude. Each of the 5 orders has 1.5 orders of its own system. And we see that at the entrance from the material world, from the bone world of energy, matter goes to the region of the middle layer, namely the producers. And from there it is redistributed towards the consolants and reducents. In other words, we see the similarity of all 3 floors. Thus, we get the same picture of the body system of the cell megasphere, microcosm, microcosm, and for the biosphere. We have, as it were, ended now with the biosphere, and will go deeper according to the principle again. From the general to the particular, as our great teacher Lenin said, in my opinion. And from the deductive method, we will delve more and more into the details. If we go deeper, then in the end, we will run into the lowest level of life, namely the DNA molecule. It is clear that life does not exist without DNA, that all genetic information, the entire structure of our cells, proteins, and so on is recorded by DNA. And it's interesting to see if this principle of the Trinity works there. Let's take a look. Now we will plunge into this topic. To begin with, the DNA helix is a kind of protective shell to DNA helices, and between these 2 helices, there are base pairs of thymine, guanine, and cytosine. There are only 4 of them, 4 molecules. These 4 molecules are actually, they are complementary only in pairs. One with thymine is connected, guanine with cytosine are connected. Thus, we have a binary code that genetically exists. At ends, just that. In other words, we come to the simple conclusion that DNA works the same code as in our computers. No. 1, 0. Binary code. The sequence of these yes, no, yes, yes, no, 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 yes constitutes, in fact, genetic information. Millions of these sequences give us a record of the right proteins. So, we looked at it and realized that yes, there really is a binary code. Of course, it's not really binary. Why? Because depending on how these pairs are arranged and what he sees, let's say it is read, if there is a this is one option, and if there is t, this is another option. That is, it is a binary code that has a mirror image. That is, it is a binary code doubled. In fact, the quaternary code. But the most interesting thing is that all these base pairs, they are grouped into triples, according to the so-called codons. Each codon combines 3 steps of DNA, 3 base pairs. And here again, we find the ternary code of the genome, genes in DNA. Moreover, this ternary code is crucial for the construction of amino acids. So, we came to the conclusion that both the binary code and the ternary code work in DNA. And here we come to the most important conclusion for us. Binary code works horizontally, and ternary code works vertically on the ladder. That is, horizontally we have a ladder, and vertically up to the ternary code. So this combinatorics, it creates about 64 variants. Why? Because 4 is in the 3rd degree. We have 4 options. Remember 2 and 2. 2 and 2 are 4. 4 in the second is 16. And again in the second is 64. We have 64 options for obtaining different amino acids. And these 64 variants, oddly enough, are used very sparsely. That is, we have 20 amino acids in total. Well, conditionally there are a little more of them. 20 amino acids. That is, out of 64 options, nature has chosen for some reason only 20 options. Moreover, the same amino acids are encoded in different ways. In this picture, if anyone is interested, you can see that different combinations of these triplets ultimately give us the same amino acid. But what is important to us? The important thing is that we have a matrix in which there are 64 cells, and this matrix is formed by a 2 and a 3. Thus, we come to a compromise, we come to syntheses, we come to the unification of the binary code. And the ternary code of the universe, we come at the very base, in DNA. We understand that this world is built not only on hierarchy, it is also built on some symmetry. The symmetry is binary in this case, this is the very minimum. And the ternary code of hierarchy creates this world for us. It manifests itself everywhere and everywhere, but it's very good. Just like on your fingers, just like on matches. I do not know, it could not be simpler, it can be seen in the structure of DNA. Can you imagine how nature tells us? Look, study, generalize, draw conclusions, and apply this principle in other places. And we can apply this principle in other places. And this principle, knowing nothing about DNA, was applied by the ancient Chinese who created their famous hexagram system. Here on the slide you can look at me. That's 64 cells. Each cell is formed by 3 grams. 3 grams upper, 3 grams lower. Moreover, every 3 grams it is formed from a combination of different variants of yes, no. Yes, it's a solid wand. No, it's, let's say, relatively speaking, an intermittent wand. That is, if we have a wand with a gap, and the wand is solid. 3 solid sticks is one option, 3 sticks with a gap is another option. All variants are the same 4 in the 3rd degree, the same 64. How did the Chinese manage to count a 50-dimensional matrix? God only knows. But again, everything is built here on the fact that there are 2 and 3, and 2 and 3, and the combination of these 2 numbers. 2 is the minimum number of even rows, and 3 is the minimum number of odd rows. And we see that odd and odd in combination give us all the variety of life. Basically, at least. Naturally, it is necessary to reduce the whole life to 64 symbols of the Chinese hexagram system. This is a very, very difficult task, but the Chinese somehow manage to guess and somehow find only 64 forecasts for their lives. I do not know how they do it, this is a separate topic. But we'll look a little further. Let's see that the Hindus who created the famous game of chess also used 64. 8 by 8, 64. And behind this 8 by 8 matrix, there is again a deep systemic meaning of the structure of nature. However, we will return to the difference between binary and ternary. What is the fundamental difference in terms of structure? Let's go back to our picture, which we have already shown. For example, if we put a living person and his marble copy next to each other, then we, looking mentally inside, will see inside the marble copy at first, it is the level of some molecules there. Let's say the structure is small. And immediately there is nothing intermediate, we see a marble body. That is, it is the lower and upper level. That's the way it is, it's an elevator, a bunker filled with grain. And if we put a person and look at the human body, we see that there is an atomic level, a molecular, a biomolecular, a subcellular level, a cellular level, and so on, and so on, and so on. Here in the table you can see that there are about 40 levels inside the animal's body of different types of structures. And all these levels, they are extremely densely located relative to each other. In other words, if we rise from the world of molecules and move into the world of viruses, then we get into a completely different world in which other laws operate. We cannot explain the behavior of viruses with the help of molecular, let's say, chemistry. We cannot explain the chemistry of molecules from the point of view of cytology. In other words, each level has its own laws. These are completely different levels. If it is in the bone nature, it is not in the stones. The difference between the bone nature and the living nature that surrounds us lies in many parameters, but one of the most important parameters is that a living structure, a living organism, has the densest hierarchical structure, the densest in which this hierarchical structure is of the most important importance. It is there that the entire regularity of the organization of this living organism is recorded. Since information about amino acids is recorded exactly in DNA through ternary cadence. Using this understanding of the difference between bony, even, and living odd ternary matter, we are now going to show how it can be constructed in the form of some scheme that will be remembered, I think, very simply for you. One more time, the fundamental difference between the bone and the living is that we have a level of some elements in the bone, and then it grows to a homogeneous structure, that is, there is no underlevel. And in the living, there is a level of atoms, molecules, macromolecules, and in the end, if we take the simplest living organism, it is a virus. The virus is made up of molecules, molecule. Macromolecules are made up of molecules, and those are made up of atoms. With some degree of stretch, we can say that at least there should be 3 hierarchical levels. And this is a fundamental difference. On this slide, we just showed it. Here there is an atom, there is a crystal the size of, let's say, 10 tonometers. If we look at the same virus, then in this virus, unlike a crystal, there are substructures. At least there should be 3 of them at the sublevel. And then we return to the mysterious rule, the principle that is well known to everyone. The living are given only an odd number of flowers, and the grave is given an even number. But from where, from what level was this information read in Russian culture? But it is so. 2 flowers are a crystal. They are dead, 3 flowers are wildlife, at least a virus. All this is put on this scheme. Our whole world is organized horizontally on the principles of symmetry, of binary doubling, at least even series, and ternary. Ternary structure vertically. And this picture shows it all well. That is, there is a 3 vertically, a 2 horizontally. This does not mean that the deuce does not work vertically. I didn't say that. I'm just saying that the fundamental principle of hierarchy is the Trinity. And you and I traced it, as you remember, to the highest metagalactic level through the biosphere, through various floors of this biosphere, and eventually reached the base, to DNA, and saw a three-dimensional vertical code there. Well, you can go further. The fact is that we have considered, as it were, the opposition of the unity of 2 and 3. 2s and 3s are even-odd rows. And I knew well Volodya Yeremayev, who researched ancient Chinese philosophy and who coined the term arithmesemiotics. Why? Because he found out that besides the fact that China had a Confucian system of teaching, there was a system of numbers. And the science of numbers in Chinese culture, it has a very deep meaning. It has not yet been fully investigated by our Russian scientific community. Yeremayev is one of the first who tried to do this. He found that all the numbers from 1 to 10 had some qualitative differences. And he was talking about generating the first numbers, which are in Chinese culture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and forming 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there is someone here who is interested, can read how a 4 differs, let's say, from a 5, from a 6, a 7, a 9, a 10. That is, the Chinese clearly tied some structural features of the world around us to specific numbers. Why am I doing this? To make it clear that 2 and 3 are just the beginning. And there was another scientist who lived 1897th year of the century before last, until 1974th year. Unfortunately, we have a little-known John Godolphin Bennett in Russia. Now these books of Bennett have been translated. His works are well translated. They are available on the internet. They can be viewed. He also came to the conclusion there that it is necessary to distinguish the binary ternary approach and qualitatively distinguish it. And moreover, he even wrote that it is necessary to go further. And he created his own numerical system. Even freed from the limitations of logic, thought does not reach beyond the triad. At the same time, there is no doubt that 4-membered, 5-membered, and more complex systems should also be significant. Then he writes, Pythagoras and the Greek philosophers were familiar with the Egyptian tradition, according to which numbers are the key to understanding reality. With this slide, I want to conclude my lecture, in which the entire universe is encoded with numbers, structures consisting of various elements. This is a topic that, from my point of view, represents a huge potential for the further development of the scientific understanding of the world around us. Why? Because if we understand the Creator's plan, which encoded everything through numbers, then we will understand how we can build our world around more harmoniously, more in accordance with the Creator's plan, and not just stupidly using different structures, not paying attention to their qualitative differences. But after I have already finished my lecture on this note, I would like to return to 3 new fundamental conclusions that can be drawn and practically used based on the ternary code that I have described here. The first one. From my point of view, this triple scheme is energetic. It can lead us to understand how to get new types of energy. Ethereal energy, where to look for it. Imagine the simplest scheme, the simplest primitive scheme of 3 levels. And suddenly we say that this is the key to a new energy, fundamentally new to ethereal energy. Isn't this the practical result of this systematization? One practical result, maybe. The second practical result is that we must understand that the metagalactic and biospheric worlds must be clearly divided into 3 subworlds, under the world of elements, under the world of objects, and under the world of systems. What will this understanding give us? The fact is that modern science, at least science as physics, it is mainly created when studying the world of objects. Well, it's understandable why. Physics studied what? The fact that it is possible to conduct experiments at the macro level. What experiments can physics build on a megastage? On the megastage? None. Some kind of experiments in which the scales will be the size of the solar system. Yes, no, of course. And since there are no experiments, there are only observations. These observations lead us to some very strange results. The famous paradox, the mass defect, which was discovered by Zwicky, in my opinion, in the 20s or in the 30s. In my opinion, in the 33rd year, I don't remember exactly now, which showed that the galaxy from the point of view of classical physics is an unstable system, that it should instantly fly apart. What is there not enough mass? How much mass is there enough? 10%? 5? Oh no. 90% is missing mass, approximately. Well, I don't remember exactly there now. A huge shortage of the mass of the galaxy. In other words, it does not work to transfer the laws of physics from the macro level to the mega level. It is necessary to make some coefficients. It is necessary to understand something else. The same goes for galaxy clusters. In other words, we do not understand the essence of this mega-event and what laws are in effect there. I'm not going to decipher my understanding now because I have it described in books. There is a clear explanation of how to approach these laws. The same applies to the microcosm. When faced with the laws of the microcosm, we found that the laws of macrophysics do not work. Led the concept of quantum physics, but a quantum physicist. He did not accept Einstein. Few people still understand it, and few people understand what quantum physics is. Why? Because it's a different world. This world of Derek's basement, from my point of view, is a world of resonances, energy resonances. There are no laws that we are used to when we connect some atoms, molecules, parts together at the macro level. Completely different principles work there. The principles are practically unknown to us, but we can understand that this is a different physics should be. In other words, there should be another physics, there should be another astrophysics. The same goes for the biosphere. The biosphere has 3 floors. The floor of objects, ideas, organisms, has been more or less studied by us. We got into the cell floor well. Humanity figured it out more or less, and then not to the end. But there is a third, upper, metasystem floor. There live strange creatures that are completely incomprehensible to us, which can be called as an organism of the system. Are these societies, starting from the family organism, from the collective of the organism, from the country of the organism, from the civilization of the organism, from the humanity of the organism? Modern science cannot say anything about this. Moreover, despite the fact that the theory of the organism, the theory of the state, goes back to Plato, passes through the whole culture, through Gobbs, through Hegel and so on, through Spengler, and comes to us, in the 20th century, it was simply closed. This topic is organizational. Yes, because again, the principles that have been developed at the object level dominate. And this is the world of systems, and there are other laws, and there are other beings who live there, whom we do not understand anything, and who need to be approached in a completely different way. I specifically only outlined, went through the very top points about the practical results that can be obtained, using this beautiful ternary structure here. But I also want to say that despite the fact that very fruitful practical results are visible here, for me personally, the highest aesthetic pleasure is not these pragmatic conclusions, but the fact that the entire universe is permeated from top to bottom with the same self-similar principles. Simple, clear, understandable. And when you begin to understand this, you calm down, because you understand that the world is reasonable, harmonious, systematic, and knowable. Thank you for your attention, dear viewers.